YouTube. So I am headed out on an adventure. I'm going to spend a couple days in Florida first and then hitting the beach and just being in touch with the water before I leave this area. If you have seen my other videos, you know that I've been snowbirding down in the Tampa Bay area of Florida for the winter. As I was preparing to leave back in March to start my RV cross-country trip, the coronavirus pandemic hit hard, and I was forced to readjust my plan and wait until things opened back up to have something to see before I headed out. That day came for Floridians on May 4th, and that's when I started my travel adventures. Because I mainly worked while I was here in Florida, I didn't get much of a chance to explore while I was here, so I decided to spend a few days hitting a few beaches before I left the state. My first stop was heading down to Fort DeSoto State Park. I had lived in St. Pete for 2 years and I had never been, and it was one of the few parks that opened back up that I really wanted to see. I mainly went for the beach, North Beach to be exact, but the park consists of 5 offshore keys or islands connected by either bridge or causeway. At one point, the park was used as a gunnery and bombing range during the World War II, but was never an active base. I was going to stay the night at the campground because they offer beach access lots, but they were still not open for taking new reservations for that. So I enjoyed the park that day and then watched the sunset and went and visited a friend later that night and ended up parking near her for the night. Watching the sunset is one of my favorite things to do, and it was one of my goals for this trip in Florida. Next stop was Gandy Beach, which is on the North Bay side of St. Pete. This spot was on the list because it's one of the few beaches in the Pinellas area where you can pull your vehicle right up on the beach and chill. They don't allow overnight parking, even though I've seen cars parked there overnight, but unfortunately there were too many sheriffs out patrolling and controlling because of social distancing, so I didn't want to risk it. So after a few hours, I drove over to an iOverlander spot in downtown Dunedin that I've stayed at before, which is right across the street from a marina. I spent my Cinco de Mayo and Taco Tuesday peacefully because there was no other vehicles parked in the lot, and then walked across the street to watch the sunset. The next morning, I headed out of Pinellas County to visit Rainbow Springs State Park, which is just outside of Ocala. I had heard great things about this park, but it didn't dawn on me to check to see if it was one of the few parks that was open. And turns out they weren't. So here's a look at what I missed. Oh well. I pulled into the closest Walmart and ate lunch and came up with a new plan. Since I was only 30 minutes from Ocala and it was hot and it had planned to rain for the rest of the night, I decided to go and visit an RV park resort that I had visited on my very first RV trip in the colorful castle so that I can finally blast some AC and just have a fun night at the RV park. So my original plans for today did not work out. So I decided to come back to a campground that I have been before on my first RV trip in my last RV, the Colorful Castle. So this is her parked up for the first time at a campground or RV park, RV resort. And it's great. You see I have the sewer hooked up, the water, and this is where the electric goes, and if you want cable. The next day I got up and got ready to spend my last day on the water before I head north to Atlanta. But first I want to show you guys how I unhook and pack up my RV on the exterior for all those who are curious on how it's done. First I shut off the valve on this end of the hose and then shut off the water from the spigot. And then I'm able to unhook it, and I remove this blue thing, which is a water filter. I store all of my water related tools here in this cabinet. And I'm throwing away this extra water filter that I don't need anymore. Next, I'm going to unhook the sewer. First, I close the valves up and then unhook it and put the cap back on. I check to make sure all of the water is out of it, and then I use my hose to rinse it out a little bit. And then I also store this in that same cabinet. Now I'm going to go back and put this cap back over the sewage hole. I realized while I was standing here that I hadn't shut off my propane, so I went ahead and did that. And then I am putting away the sewer hose support. This one goes in a cabinet on the other side with my extra long hose here in this cabinet. It's the only place it will fit. If you live in Florida during May, you know about the love bug season, and they get all over your car. And if you don't rinse them off right away, they'll damage your paint. So I went ahead and gave her a quick wash on the front to get rid of the love bugs, and look at her sparkle. After I was done with that, I was able to put the hose away, and I put that in the same cabinet with the rest of the water related items. And then lastly, I do my power. and it's a breaker box that it's plugged into, so you shut off the breaker, and I already shut off the one inside, and then I shoved the cord back into that cabinet. The next stop was another spot I found on iOverlander. It was a spot out in English, Florida at Yankeetown Beach. The actual spot listed was closed, but there was a small park before that had beach access that I decided to stay at for the day. I had planned to spend the night, but I had absolutely no cell service the whole day, and as much as I love being off-grid, it was unfamiliar territory, and the no-see-um bugs were vicious at sundown. So it's the end of the last day of my adventures in Florida, and I'm very, very, very grateful that I got to spend this time and not worry about anything. All I did was just go with the flow. I had a slight plan, but just went with the flow. When things weren't open, I just picked up and went to what was. And today I'm ending my last sunset at the beach. There she is. There's the sun coming right towards me. Queen Tasha. I'm gonna enjoy the sunset. After my last sunset at the beach, I headed out and drove 1 hour to spend the night at a rest stop on 75 since I was hitting the highway north to Georgia in the morning. I got to see the glowing full moon on the ride there. So that's all for my adventures in Florida. Thank you for watching this video. Look out for part 2 video that will be my adventures in Atlanta and finally making it all the way to my brother's house in North Carolina, where I'll be hanging out for a few weeks until I figure out my next road trip adventures. Please like and subscribe. Peace and blessings.